Um, so yeah, so let's get into the results a little bit. So we looked at 37 consecutive patients, and there's some information just on we sometimes move people up to 50 times to elicit directional preference. We were using mobilization and overpressure day one if we were suspected derangement, and we're looking for confirmation. One thing that I thought was interesting that we did this in the wrist, we were searching for the most reductive directional preference. So we were attempting to get abolishment of all pain day one if we could. So we ended up moving people more probably than usual because of that, which I think led to a lot of different interesting loading strategies, especially in the wrist study. There was a lot of new, for me, and I think for most people, loading strategies that were elicited at the wrist. In this study, most of them I think were fairly straightforward, at least from my perspective. But anyway, so to elicit directional preference, we cited other research. We wanted at least a 2-point change in pain, at least a 50% change in range of motion or functional baseline. So, pain was the main driver, and we set a much higher change in functional change, and movement change, because I've just seen people get a little bit of movement change out of something and be all excited about it and think they're on it, and then it's incorrect. And then, they might completely miss the classification because that person comes back no better, And like from a general PT standpoint, you can stretch anything a little bit and get moved better. So I wanted that to be significant if there wasn't pain reduction, because not everyone had pain reduction. Sometimes it was just a movement change or a functional change. I think that's also kind of important. And then the variables that we looked at for prediction of peripheral derangement. So these were people that we confirmed had an elbow derangement or a knee derangement, and we wanted to try to figure out what is their directional preference. We monitored mechanical stress, directional vulnerability, painful movement, and obstructive movement. So mechanical stress was something that they did a lot. So like, for instance, a knee, let's say someone that exercises a lot and bends their knee a lot and sits all day at work and flexes their knee a ton in their life. This study was also echoed in the wrist study, found about 90% of people's inverse relationship to that mechanical stress was the opposite movement. So the person that flexes their knee a lot, they needed to extend their knee a lot. So if you hear that in history and you can confirm that there's knee derangement, you don't have to move someone for 3 hours or for 3 weeks to find directional preference. You might get there very quickly, which was interesting. And not something that in the peripheral joints and spine, we talk about that all the time with posture and provocative movements. But in the periphery, I didn't really think about it that way. I had some kind of previous to this, I had some moves that seemed to work a lot, and I just tried them. But I found myself testing people more and moving people more. It was more frustrating for me, more frustrating for the patient, because most people don't want to be moved around more than they need to, especially if it's uncomfortable. And then the variables that we looked at for spinal prediction were detectable peripheral movement loss, detectable spinal movement loss, paresthesia. And these next ones are a little confusing, I think, but are relevant because they ended up being associated with spinal referral. So we looked at pain at rest, constant pain, intermittent pain at rest, and intermittent pain or intermittent symptoms without pain at rest. So, for instance, that last one would be like if you just move your shoulder and there's a painful arc at 90 degrees, and then there's no other pain. It never lasts, it never lingers. It's just, so I didn't used to think about that either, but there was some connection as we get into the results of that. So in evaluating all of these patients and tracking all that data with them. We inputted it into an Excel sheet and did secondary analysis on it and ran statistical measures on it to find association. And so 37 patients, the original provisional classification, there were 12 extremity derangements, no articular dysfunctions, no contractile dysfunctions, 14 spinal derangements. And then there, in the other section, there was 2 traumas, 1 post-surgical patient, and 8 inconclusive, so a total of 11 in other. After testing, either day 1 or a lot of these people ended up changing over the course of 24 to 72 hours, probably a couple, maybe within a week, had a change in classification. And so the extremity derangement went from 12 to 16. Articular derangement went from 0 to 1. We had no contractile dysfunctions. Spinal derangement went from 14 of provisional classification to 17. And then the two traumas stayed the same, the post-surgical stayed the same, and the 8 inconclusives all changed into either extremity derangement or spinal derangement. And there was 1 left as inconclusive. So the total numbers or the total percentages on that were, I'm gonna have to refer back to that, but basically 89% of all of them were either a spinal or peripheral derangement, which is a ton.